he would only give the interview deep in his meat. And I'm saying to myself beforehand, and he asked me about that inspection system, and he gave us his general money. So we say baloney, but that was a total lie. And so I pulled out of my pocket and said, well, that's not true. What you do is you take this stamp. In the day, it was not an hour-long presidential interviews in prime time. Very rare time. It didn't happen all the time then. But I always felt honored and privileged to be anyway. There's a question, but they were both avid readers of newspapers. From the time I was in memory age, they read the newspapers, they discussed what was in the newspapers, they talked about the newspapers. My father referred to newspapers as the poor man's university. And somewhere back in, as I was coming of middle age, I began to think, if they spend that much time in newspapers, it must be important. And I would say influenced me to dream of being a reporter, and that was my dream. With others, when we played those games as kids, what do you want to be when you grow up? I want to be an airplane pilot, I want to be an Indian chief, I want to be a doctor. I always said I want to be a reporter. And I know it's because my mother and father read newspapers. They also both voracious readers of books and relatively to the library. They should have been library. So I'd say they were major influences. People tend to say that their parents were major influences, whatever they were then, and I'm one of those people. Beyond that, I got encouragement from teachers in elementary school. Ms. Simmons, the principal who I mentioned earlier, I had talked about wanting to do a school newspaper, and she arranged for me to do a newspaper pretty much 2 pages every 2 weeks. And then when I was in high school, at John Reagan High School in Houston, my journalism teacher, Mrs. Wilson, again, I don't think she saw much talent, but she saw the dream, and she saw the determination, and she was a great encourager. And then when I got to Sam Houston, Hugh Cunningham was a huge influence because he convinced me that I actually could do it. It was one thing as a child, and when I said a dream, but Cunningham convinced me that I really could do it.
Okay, last student question, and the others to talk about, this is from a student perspective. How has the media, and then we'll have a couple more, and then we'll disperse here. How has the media positively, negatively influenced presidential politics from when you began until now? Good question.
Here's a good question. Well, on the positive side, that there's no comparison with the amount of information that's available about candidates. Far more information available to far more people in far more platforms, internet, television, radio, newspaper, right? Far more information available to far more people. And candidate appearances, such things as what I call joint appearances. They're not debates, they're joint appearances, things of that sort. So on the plus side, all of that is on the plus side. On the negative side, that, as I mentioned earlier, not just presidential administrations, but campaigns for the presidency they have much greater ability to influence youth coverage. And one reason that we are looking at the last presidential campaign cost well over $1 billion. That's what it paid. The coming presidential campaign of 2012, will be at least between $2 and $3 billion. And much of that money goes to influence the press, and by influencing the press, influence the voters. I think that's the biggest change. That to run, if you're running for the Senate in Texas, the U.S. Senate, and you have a primary campaign. If you don't have or are not able to raise, I would say at least $65 to $70 million, then you probably don't have a chance. And that money is effective, as I say, it's effective coverage. It's affected the ability to live with coverage. None of us like the word propaganda, particularly those of us old enough to remember World War II. But a lot of what can only be accurately described as outright propaganda is now bought as part of those billions of dollars in tax costs.
Part of that,
Well, kind of as a wrap-up, I'd like to get your thought on the future of the class.
Well, I'm going to try to answer the question, but it's important to understand that I think on my very best days, I think I'm at least a half-decent reporter about reporting people what has happened. When it comes to talking about the future, predicting what's going to happen in the future, as Ed Murrow once said, my opinion is not worth any more than the guy in the bar. And I have learned over the years that he who lives by the crystal ball learns to eat a lot of broken glass. And I think that's my share. But with that caveat, that I'm an optimist by experience and by nature. And why wouldn't I be? I'm optimistic about the country. I worry about where we are now, who doesn't. We have 2 wars, an economy that's volatile, and all the things we don't know. But I'm optimistic about the future. And I'm optimistic about the future of journalism. The journalism, and we're talking now about journalism in all forms, is in what the Catholic Church calls an interregnum, which is to say, the old order is gone. The new order is not yet in place. And we're trying as journalists, those who own journalistic enterprises and those of us in the press, to sort of feel our way through this interregnum. I have no doubt that we will come out eventually at some future point where what's so lacking today will again be provided. The biggest lack is international coverage, what used to be called foreign coverage. It's expensive to do, expensive to maintain bureaus and send people overseas. And the shrinkage of international coverage, at every time we need more, we're getting less. At the very time we need better quality, we're getting poor quality. And the other is investigation. That is called deep digging into malfeasance, corruption, those kinds of things. Again, it's very expensive. So in the record, particularly these 2 areas of journalism have shrunk to an alarming degree. What very few people, with few exceptions, but everybody's figured out, is how to pay for this kind of coverage. But I think we'll find it. Nobody's come up with whole business models that are either dead and buried or clearly died in the dinosaur stage. Nobody's yet come up with the kind of business models that will command quality journalism of integrity. And I feel particularly strongly about independent, truly independent coverage. That we talk a lot about free press, and we should, but a genuinely free press that is truly independent, fiercely independent when necessary, is the red beating heart of freedom and kind of government and kind of society we have. And I do worry about it. It's shrunk to an alarming degree now. I can't wait for it to have a renaissance because we need it badly. And since we're at the end, if you'll indulge me, I do want to say, particularly to those in the audience who are either practicing journalists or students who aspire to be journalists, that yes, it is a rough and sort of tumble craft, filled, as I said one time today, with, including myself, stubble-bearded, nicotine-stained, whiskey-breath reporters, the borderline cynics, skeptics, But at its best, journalism is a noble craft, and one absolutely vital, absolutely essential to the innards of free people. And I never want to miss an opportunity to say that to those who aspire to journalism, because if you do it right, if you do it as it's supposed to be done, it is important and noble work.
Well stated. Tell us.
The first part is, what am I doing now?
Tell us about it.
HNet is high-quality, high-definition television. It's owned by the entrepreneur Mark Cuban, who I know is not one in Texas. We do a one-hour program every week. We do 42 one-hour program a week, specializing in international coverage and investigative reports. It's seen on both of the satellite distributors and on a lot of cable systems. We're not carrying on every cable system, but that's what I do now. I work with 22 people, each one of whom I've chosen. One of them is in the audience tonight, Amanda Ritchie, if you're in the audience. She's a graduate of this institution. But what we have at HNet for our program, which is called Panorama Reports, is we have total, complete, absolute editorial and community control. But that's what I do now.
So let me just give you about 3 or 4 they came up with. Quote, it's cardiac arrest time, and high it is, it's spandex time. Quote, this race is shakier than cafeteria jello. And lastly, my favorite, quote, maybe you can bring some perspective to this. We're plumb out. As a last thought, you got any new rallyisms for us?
Well, I appreciate you going through those. Well, let me think for just a second. Perhaps you've seen some of these joint appearances by the Republican aspects of the Republican nomination, because they're incumbent Democratic president have them. I've watched each and every one of them. But the thought occurs to me that these joint appearances by these candidates are about as dull as the second act of an Ibsen play.